Okay, Bernie Sanders. What does he think about the tariffs? Well, throughout his career, he's opposed NAFTA. He's opposed most trade deals. For decades, he's been complaining about the loss of factory jobs to places like China, the race to the bottom when it comes to paying workers as little as possible by shipping their jobs to foreign sweatshops. But he doesn't support Trump's tariffs. He doesn't support this cluster bomb of 200 arbitrary trade deals that Trump is trying to make. Bernie supports selective tariffs that are designed with pinpoint accuracy to protect jobs and human rights. And if you listen to him, as he and AOC continue to play to packed crowds, record turnout for their Fighting Oligarchy tour, he says Trump's tariffs are inflationary. Because even though Trump lies and insists foreign countries are going to pay the tariffs, it's the American consumer paying those tariffs. And according to most economists, even with Trump suspending his tariffs until July, consumers will begin seeing a sharp rise in prices starting in May. Amazon already raising prices. That's why Trump had to get on the phone to threaten Bezos. So even if these tariffs are permanently suspended, we will still see inflation. Greed. Corporations were able to raise prices during COVID once everyone became convinced that there were supply chain issues. Even though the supply chain issues were temporary, somehow corporate America convinced us they were permanent. So corporations kept jacking up prices, even when Pete Buttigieg, Secretary of Transportation, and Joe Biden solved the supply chain issue. So Biden, if you remember, spoke out against greedflation. Corporations will raise prices when they can convince enough consumers raw material costs more than they actually do. There are ways around this. Windfall profit tax. They did that with the oil companies in the 70s. There are ways to, it's a form of domestic tariffs. You're going to be greedy, going to charge too much, we're going to tax your profits. So my prediction is we're going to see more greedflation, where corporations start claiming Trump's tariffs left them with no choice but to raise prices, even if Trump's tariffs, if the freeze goes beyond July, which I think this freeze is going to remain in place. Nevertheless, I believe corporations, because they can get away with it, will raise prices, saying, don't blame us, blame the tariffs that aren't actually in effect. And then Trump will start flipping out. Gary Cohn served in the first Trump administration as director of the National Economic Council. He pointed out over the weekend that the inflation caused by these tariffs will primarily hurt poor people because 100% of their income is spent on food, clothing, and all the other basic necessities of life that are about to become way more expensive. Gary Cohn said rich people save their money. Poor people spend all of it. The more you spend, the more you're going to feel the inflation. Trump continues to lie. He's a pathological liar. He insists the world is kissing his ass, begging him to make a deal. But so far, the leader of China, Xi, refuses to still come to the phone. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter that Xi refuses to come to the phone. Trump says we're very close to a deal with Xi. The Chinese are saying, not true. Not true. Trump says, I've made 200 deals already. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent was asked about those 200 deals and said, well, I believe he's referring to sub-deals. Sub-deals. Get the 6-inch teriyaki chicken pro sub of the day, a small drink, and a side of chips, or 2 cookies for just $6.99. Those are the sub-deals that Trump has negotiated. Scott Bessent has tried to get Xi on the phone, but the leader of China won't take his call. Asked on ABC's This Week about Trump and Xi talking, Bessent said, well, I don't know whether or not they're talking. But then he quickly added, quote, Trump and Xi Jinping have a very good relationship and a lot of respect for each other. Well, that's why Xi doesn't answer Trump's phone calls. Their relationship is so rock solid, they can finish each other's sentences. They don't need to talk on the phone. They can just negotiate telepathically. The Chinese government, however, as I said, denies any negotiations are taking place. There's word that Xi is using this as an opportunity to break the United States. Hey, Xi, just leave that to Trump. You don't just take a break. You don't need to break us. Trump's doing a good job all by himself. There are some reports that China might lift some of its retaliatory tariffs on U.S. semiconductors. There's some talk. And of course, Trump is lifting some of the tariffs on automobiles because Tesla. Bessent praised Trump as the master negotiator. He said that Trump knows exactly what he's doing by announcing tariffs, freezing the tariffs, unfreezing some, unfreezing others, freezing more tariffs. And Bessent said, quote, "In game theory, it's called strategic uncertainty. Well, in real life, it's called you're a moron. Strategic uncertainty. How about strategic stupidity? This is what you do when you don't know what you're doing. You talk about game theory and drop phrases like strategic uncertainty." Scott Bessent, this is another Yale graduate, by the way, explained, quote, "In game theory, it's called strategic uncertainty, so you're not going to tell the person on the other side of the negotiation where you're going to end up. And nobody's better at creating this leverage than President Trump." Yes, Trump, the great negotiator, like those peace talks with Putin, where before the talks even begin, Trump says, well, I'm already planning to lift economic sanctions, let you keep Crimea and all the territory in the Donbass region. I'm also agreeing that Ukraine can't join NATO or the EU. Okay, now let's negotiate. Is that the strategic uncertainty you're talking about, Scott Bessent? Strategic uncertainty. Trump is an imbecile. She is not returning your calls, Trump, because she knows you're an imbecile. No uncertainty, no strategic uncertainty there. She is strategically certain, Donald Trump, that you're an imbecile. Putin doesn't want to negotiate because he's strategically certain that Donald Trump is his bitch. Putin doesn't need to negotiate because his bitch, Donald Trump, is giving him everything he wants. So why not just keep fighting, especially since the Republicans won't be sending weapons to Ukraine anytime soon? Senator Ed Markey, warning Trump's plan to give Russia what amounts to 30% of Ukraine will not be enough to satisfy Putin, who, Markey said, ultimately will try to take all of Ukraine. Well, of course he will. As you know, the Trump administration is getting very tired of Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky's refusal to surrender. Don't you want peace, Vladimir Zelensky? Don't you want to make peace with the man who's ethnically cleansing the Donbass region of Ukrainians, kidnapping tens of thousands of Ukrainian children, erasing Ukrainian history in Crimea because he doesn't believe there's such a thing as the Ukrainian people? He believes they're Russian. Vladimir Zelensky, why don't you want to make peace? Secretary of State Marco Rubio saying, we just don't know what we're going to do about Zelensky. He's not interested in surrendering and permitting Putin to take all of Ukraine and commit further genocide. Zelensky obviously doesn't want to stop the killing in order for Putin to continue more of it. We don't know what we're going to do about Zelensky. Well, he didn't say that, but he implied. And he's warning, Rubio, our Secretary of State, is warning, this week is critical. And unless America sees a willingness from both sides for Ukraine to lose and give Putin everything he wants, then there's really nothing we can do. Our hands are tied. Rubio is kind of saying that he, Trump, the United States, we're about to walk away from the negotiations unless Zelensky agrees to stop negotiating. There can be no more negotiations if Zelensky insists on negotiating. Russia invaded Ukraine in February of 2022, or according to Trump, Zelensky dragged Russian tanks into Ukraine in February of 2022. The last time both sides sat down to talk peace was in the spring of 2022. Since then, it's been a grinding war of attrition similar to World War I, where Russia takes some territory, Ukraine takes it back, then Russia takes it back again, and it never ends. So Putin did call for a 3-day truce that would start on May 8th until the 10th, so Russia could observe the 80th anniversary of Germany's defeat in World War II. A sad day for the Trump family. North Korea says 12,000 of its troops are now fighting alongside Russia in the war on Ukraine. North Korea state radio taking credit for Russia's latest victory in Kursk. That's part of Russia, it's Western Russia. Ukraine, in August of last year, seized much of Kursk, which Russia then reclaimed last month thanks to some help from North Korean soldiers. Donald Trump, in open defiance of Europe, saying he's prepared to recognize Crimea as Russian territory. Crimea was seized by Russia in 2014, and the United States is about to defy the United Nations, the International Criminal Court, NATO, and the EU by recognizing Crimea officially as Russian territory. Now, only 21 countries recognize Crimea as Russian territory, and these are among the heavy hitters. The Taliban, Belarus, Iran, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, North Korea, Nicaragua, Serbia, Syria, Zimbabwe, and Venezuela. So when it comes to Ukraine, Trump's on the same side as Venezuela, which we're at war with. He invoked the Alien Enemies Act because he says we've been invaded by Venezuela, but when it comes to Ukraine and Crimea being Russian territory, we're on the same side as our mortal enemy, Venezuela. Somebody should tell Venezuela that we're at war with them. I think that's only polite. So, despite Vladimir Zelensky repeatedly saying throughout the year that Crimea is a non-negotiable, we will not cede it to Russia, Trump said yesterday, I believe Zelensky is ready to give up Crimea. Never said that. Trump thinks if I put words in Zelensky's mouth, he's going to think, did I say I'm going to give up Crimea? Trump just said I did. And he always tells the truth, so I guess I said it. Zelensky admits that Ukraine lacks the weapons right now to take Crimea back from Russia. And as I suggested on the last show, this is why Trump says, I'm recognizing Crimea as Russian territory. You can't win. And that is the Trump doctrine. The Trump doctrine is might makes right. Whoever is the strongest can take whatever they want. Russia took Crimea. You don't have the weapons to take it back. Now it's Russia that owns it. Might makes right. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov appeared on CBS News and said Russia is not negotiating Crimea. We're not giving it back. After Putin launched a major offensive on Kyiv last week, killing civilians, Trump pretended he was worried Putin was stringing him along and really didn't want peace. Remember that? Trump pretending he believed it might be time for economic sanctions against Putin, contradicting all his previous statements this year, written by Putin, where Trump proclaims, I'm prepared to lift economic sanctions going all the way back to the Obama administration as an incentive to get Putin to the surrender table. But Trump now pretending to hint maybe the answer is more economic sanctions. Trump wants us to believe he's keeping an open mind when in fact that mind is being kept by Putin. Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer calling on more, not fewer, sanctions against Russia this week. And now Iowa Republican Senator Chuck Grassley accusing Putin of playing America for a patsy. Chuck Grassley now agreeing with Schumer that the time has come for more economic sanctions on Russia. Secretary of State Marco Rubio saying he opposes more economic sanctions because it would signal to Putin that the United States has no interest in negotiating a peace settlement. Well, they don't. You want to negotiate a surrender. According to Foreign Affairs magazine, Pope Francis opposed the invasion of Ukraine, but he also opposed economic sanctions on Russia, saying economic sanctions only punish the most vulnerable. Foreign Affairs writes the Pope said that while the invasion of Ukraine was wrong, the West is partly to blame by encouraging NATO, quote, to bark at Russia's door, unquote. Pope Francis said Western expansion made Putin jumpy. The Pope added that the people who want this war the most are the arms merchants. Well, Putin has gone on record saying Ukraine isn't a real country, and this is why his soldiers have been erasing any memory of Ukrainian history. Inside museums, libraries, and any government buildings, Russian soldiers seize. Russia is also kidnapping Ukrainian children. from the Donbas region, taking them back to orphanages in Moscow where they are given to Russian-speaking parents. It is estimated that at least 20,000 Ukrainian children have been sent into what amounts to be Russian re-education camps, where these children, their Ukrainian identity erased, and then they are handed over to their new Russian parents. This is a war crime designated to terrorize at first and then eliminate the Ukrainian people in the Donbas region. One of the first things Trump did upon returning to office this year is shut down funding for a United States-backed NGO called Ukraine Conflict Observatory, which is part of Yale University's Humanitarian Research Lab. The Ukraine Conflict Observatory tracks and attempts to maintain a database of children who have been abducted by Russian soldiers. They maintain a database of Ukrainian children abducted by Russian soldiers. Well, Trump, one of the first things he did when he returned to the Oval Office is he defunded the Ukraine Conflict Observatory, and he was criticized. So Marco Rubio announced it would restore some of the funding, just enough money for it to get shut down so it could transfer its database to Europol, which serves as the European Union's top law enforcement agency. He shut down Yale University's Ukraine Conflict Observatory, gave them just enough money so they could transfer their database to the EU. Well, of course, after speaking with Zelensky before the Pope's funeral, Trump lied and promised Zelensky that, of course, the United States will look into these missing kids. So there's what Trump says and what he does. There already was an organization keeping a database of these kidnapped Ukrainian children, but Trump essentially shut it down. But all of a sudden now he claims he's asked the Russians to return all the Ukrainian kids they absconded with. Sergei Lavrov, the Russian foreign minister, telling CBS News, Trump never asked Putin or him about the thousands of missing Ukrainian children, kidnapped children. He calls them missing. They've been kidnapped. Lavrov said Russia doesn't kidnap children. He said during wars, kids will often wander away from their parents, and that Russia is keeping some Ukrainian children in orphanages until they can be reunited with their parents. Trump and the Republicans doing nothing about these Ukrainian children, which I find surprising because we all know how much MAGA Republicans care about children. They love children. They do.